We are back, and I'm so glad that you're back with us. We are going to celebrate as we kick off the new season with the legends. That's right here, Detroit Association of Black Storytellers, for Friday, 7 p.m. Legends will roll. Before we go to starting with our legends, we need to take a quick break because we always want to make sure we thank our sponsors. Let's be right back. Looking for a new church home? Then look no further than 14179 Evergreen Road, where you'll be welcomed in at 10 a.m. every Sunday morning at Rosedale Park Baptist Church. They're located at 14179 Evergreen Road in Detroit, Michigan. For upcoming events and live stream information, call 313 538 1180. Again, 313 538 1180. Gregory Alexander, Senior Pastor. Rosedale. Rosedale Park Baptist Church. We thank you so much for sponsoring this episode on this evening. We couldn't do this evening's program without you. For more information, go to their website, www.at-the.net. That's www.at-the.net. Now, on to our first teller. You know, when I first met the teller that's coming up now, I think it went back to at least 2000 and actually 2010. 2010 I came in and just been floored ever since. But I won't go into too much more. I'm going to let you see what I'm talking about. And as I bring up Elder Vicky, you tell me on my return. Elder Vicky.
Hello, my name is Elder Lady Vicky Slaughter, the storyteller. Today I'm going to talk to you about on being elder. When I was a little girl, I used to think being an elder was someone old and bent over and weak and needy. I thought about when I was in church, I used to hear someone say, Lord, I thank you for waking me up this morning and being in my right mind. So in my head, that's what I thought an elder was. So I decided I'd go to the Webster Dictionary, and I looked up what an elder was. It says, someone much older than everyone else, an influencer, or an official in the church. So with these two things in mind, it brought up my mother, Mrs. Equilla Gray Walls. One day, she came to me crying. She was in her early 60s. And she said, I'm so lonely. My best friends have died. And so my father said, well, what about me? I'm here. Am I mincemeat or something? But I knew what she meant. Her two friends, one Mrs. Louetta Gentry Morgan, had been my mother's friend since she was 20. They had met traveling to Seattle, Washington on a train, going to build airplanes for Boeing during World War II. While they were there, they were roommates with 10 other girls. And she said they never argued. They always got along. 12 girls sleeping in one room. When the war was over, my mother and my godmother, they both went home. My godmother went home to Oklahoma. My mother went home to Arkansas. But they joined back up in Detroit. Her other friend was Mrs. Kaysen. My mother was a nurse. Mrs. Kaysen, they both were emergency room nurses at the city hospital. They worked more than 30 years together. My godmother died of an asthma attack suddenly, and Mrs. Kaysen died from a heart attack. Our friends, my mother and and Mrs. Casey were friends. My father was friends. They belonged in a club together. They called themselves the 10 Grand, and they traveled all over the world in the United States together. So I kind of understood my mother's loss. So I didn't really know what to say to her. So I had a girlfriend that she had had 4 or 5 children by now, but she said she had had multiple pregnancies. Over 10 children had died. And what she did, she walked around blessing her house saying, thank you, Lord. Thank you for healthy children. Thank you for bright and smart, beautiful children. And before she knew it, she had been with no children. She had 11. So my mother said, okay, I know what I'll do. So she started going around the neighborhood collecting children that weren't going to church on Sunday. And my father would get in the car and he'd drive to church. But it was so many children that my mother would walk them to church. And when they got to church, they had a breakfast program. And they would have cereal and milk and toast and juice. And then they would attend Sunday school in church. So my mother didn't stop there because she had retired in about 3 more years. So then she became an official in the church. She went around with the minister giving communion to the people at church that were ill. And then she would stay and she would bathe that person. She would change her clothes and wash their sheets. She would even stay and cook dinner for them. So she had become an official. Also, my mother and father, they continued to travel with their 10 Grand Social Club. And my mother would take pictures and give people's addresses, and she would write them. This went on for years. I did not know that my mother had this extra life. So what happened is that 30 years later, my mother died around 90. Then she had 2 funerals. And you know what goes on with people that have migrated to other places and they want to go home to be buried. So what my mother did was she had a funeral here in Detroit and she had a funeral in Arkansas. And my father had the same, and he was buried in the VA hospital in North Little Rock in Arkansas. So anyway, we had the funeral, and at the funeral, there were so many people. There was only standing room. It was a big church. The people just crowded in the churchyard. So the young people got up and talked about what she had done for them. They talked about how she came and got them and made sure that they had breakfast, how she prayed for them, how she wrote them. She would send them Christmas and birthday cards with a little something, you know what I'm talking about, in it. So we went to the second funeral in Arkansas. My aunt said, well, don't be upset if no one comes to the funeral. But it was the same thing. There were people from Texas, California, Chicago. There was one man that came with us that went to Detroit to the funeral, and he says, she was my friend, and I'm going all the way with her. So he came from Chicago to Detroit, then he traveled to Arkansas. And he told us, he said, she did that much for my mother when she died. And I remembered that. I said, I thought my mother was on vacation. She didn't even tell us that she had done that. So anyway, my husband said, your mother has your mother hobby is people, and that everyone she knows is a friend. She has no strangers in her life. So I kind of thought about those things, and I said, I'm getting older now, and I said, have I done those things? A friend of mine, he told me, he says, I can't wait to get older. I'm going to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to be a little old man driving slowly, just like these people are doing me when I'm trying to get to work in the morning. And I said, okay, I meet that criteria, because I had stayed till dark one day in my mother's hometown, and I had to get on the highway and go to another city where my daughter lived. And the state trooper stopped me. And I said, what did I do? I'm driving 65 miles an hour. And I said, I thought the speed limit was 45 to 70. He said, yes, it is. But these transport trucks will mow you down. Do you see that they're doing 100? We're going to drive behind you until you're comfortable doing 100 so that you can safely get back to where you're going. So I thought about it. I said, my husband, he would enjoy that. My grandson would enjoy it. But I was like this. I was terrified having to drive 100 miles an hour on the highway. So when they finally pulled off, I brought it back down to 70. So I said, okay, I met that criteria. So then I had a few, the next criteria was official. So I had a few appointed positions in church. And so I said, okay, I'm official. And I'm an influencer, I guess. And I'm met the criteria of age. So anyway, I felt good. And my question to you is an elder really a little old, weak, and needy person? Or really is an elder a person who reaches back and teaches you things and shares their life with you and other people? So I said, I think I'm like my mother. I think I'm an elder. So my next story I'd like to share with you is called Two Old Women. And it's a story about Eskimos. It's a really, really hundreds and hundreds year old story. And it's about two women that thought that they were useless. And the whole community thought they were useless. And so I'd like to share this with you. Ugh, my back hurts. Oh, goodness. Oh, that's nothing. My hands hurt. I've been doing all this sewing. Look at my hands. I can't even straighten them out. This went on day in and day out with these two old Eskimo ladies. But they didn't know, what do the elders tell us? Every shut-eye ain't sleep. Every goodbye ain't gone. And you don't know who's watching and who's listening to you. So it was famine. It was wintertime, and it was famine going on. And so the people, they listened to them, and they said, why should we share our food with them? They're old. They're useless. So they called a special meeting, and they decided that when they moved on to the next campsite, they would leave these two old ladies there. So the two old ladies were there. The two old ladies were surprised when they found out that can you stop it? Because I can't take this anymore. It's too much. And then I'll keep. Okay, please. So they had a meeting, the council, and they decided they would leave the two old ladies. So when the community came and started taking their cook pots, their knives, and their spears, they knew what was going on, that they were being left to die and to starve right there at that campsite. Well, there were two ladies. The one, her name was Chickadee. The other one's name was Star. Star's mother had seen a shooting star when she was born. Chickadee's mother said she reminded her of the chickadees that would sing and fly around. Chickadee was 80 years old, and Star was 75. And what they did, they didn't cook and do things like that anymore. But what they did was they sewed coats and vests and mittens and hats. They didn't have to cut their wood or start fires because all the young people in the area would do that for them. Chickadee had a daughter who had a son. The son loved his grandmother very much. The daughter, she was afraid to say anything. Chickadee and Star, they wouldn't say anything because they didn't want the wrath of the men who were the hunters to come down on them. So they closed their mouth. But the grandson said, and that meant his hatchet, which he carried in his belt. He took it and he put it in a tree. So after the people left, then Star, who had seen him do that, went over and got the hatchet. They had left them a piece of rawhide. Chickadee said, I'm just going to lay back here and die. I'm just going to freeze to death. Star, she took the hatchet and she cut the rawhide into thin roll. And she went out and she set some traps for rabbits and squirrels. But Chickadee was just there. She laid and she woke up the next morning. Well, Star had already caught some squirrels, the rabbits, and she was cooking them. So Chickadee, she woke up and she ate and she felt better. And they said, what are we going to do? Are we going to just stay here and die? There's not going to be enough game for us to eat. And so Chickadee, she said, well, you remember when we were girls and we lived by the river? There was always enough fish. So they said, well, how are we going to get there? Well, we're going to have to walk. Well, you know, they hadn't been walking and exercising or doing anything. So they loaded up their things into their sled and they started walking. And they walked and they walked. They walked till dark and then they ate more of the food. They got up the next morning and they did the same thing. And you know, they used canes. But after a while, they didn't have to use the canes. After a while, the back didn't hurt. The hands straightened out. And they kept walking. They even had to cross a couple of rivers that had ice on them. And they were able to cross the river safely. And they finally got to their home site where they used to catch salmon. There was plenty to eat, plenty of rabbits, plenty of grouse. There were cranberries. They were there a whole year just fishing and collecting food and hiding food here and there in different caches. They even had a bear to bother them, but they learned how to deal with the bear. They would take the guts from the salmon and put it way downriver, and the bear preferred to eat the guts from the salmon rather than go fishing for himself. So he just laid around. And so by this time, they had been gone a year. The the people that had left them were in very bad shape. They were starving to death. Many of the children had died. The older people had gotten sick and died. And they said, we're being punished. We're being punished because we left those two old women to die. So the chief sent a group of men back to that campsite, but they couldn't find them. They couldn't find their bones or anything. So one of the older hunters, he said, they're alive. They left. He said, where could they have gone? And they decided, oh, they would check at one of their old sites where they caught the salmon. So they sent some young men who were runners, and they could run all day. And they had taken Star and Chickadee weeks to get there, but it only took the boys about 4 days to run there. But when they got there, they found nothing. And they came home. Because, see, Chickadee and Star, they were afraid someone would find out all the food that they had stashed away and take it from them. And in time of starvation, people do mean and terrible things. So they hid. Every time they went to the river, wherever, they always covered their tracks with a branch covered with leaves. And they moved themselves a long way away. So anyway, the old hunter this time came back with the men and the young men. And they looked, and the old hunter said, look at the tree. And they said, we don't see anything. He said, look at the trees. They have taken the bark off the trees to cook with. And they just didn't take all the bark off of one tree. They would take some off of this tree over here, a little bit. They spreaded it out so that no one would know that they were using the bark from the tree. And so then he said, he caught a whiff. He smelled smoke. And he told the young man, he said, can you smell that smoke? And they said, no. So he said, well, just follow me. And they walked a long while. And he says, now, smell it. And at first the young man couldn't smell the smoke, but then they could. And then the old man started calling, Star, Chickadee, Star, Chickadee. And they heard him, and they were afraid, and they wouldn't answer. But then they found where they were hidden in their tent. And they came upon two women, not bent over, not complaining. These two women with their spears and their hatchets, waiting for them to fight for what they had worked for. And so they said, we're not here to hurt you or steal from you. The chief felt really bad and sent us to find you and bring you back. Well, we don't want to come back. You left us there to die. We'll just stay here. So anyway, they said, well, we'll tell you what. We have plenty of food. We'll share this food with you. But none of you but the four young men and the old hunter can come. We don't want to see anyone. And they can't come close to us. And so one young man said, well, I'll fight for you and I'll protect you with my life. Then the other young men said the same. And then the old hunter said, yes, I will do that too. I will protect you with my life. So they took all this food, the smoked salmon, these dried cranberries, and they took it back to the people that were starving. So what ended up happening is that the people came to the river. They traveled to the river. But Chickadee and Star only issued out a little food at a time to make it last and so the people could live through the winter. So this story, to me, shows that you're not, as we get older, there's something that we can share. There's something that we can teach the young people. We remember how things were and how we survived. And these things you could share. One person came up to me this summer and she said, I miss your mother. My mother's been dead for 11 years. She says, I still have her letters. I read her letters. She said, they give me encouragement when I am sad. So I'm reaching out to all you elders. I want you to think about what you can do.
Yes. Elder, you put a new spin on it. It is wonderful to be an elder.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. A good perspective as well. Now, did I not tell you guys? See for yourself. Excellent job.
Thank you.
And so tell me this. Oftentimes we want to know how, as a member of DABS and being an elder, how did you become? Take us back.
A member of that?
Yeah.
Well, in 1994, I came across a flyer and it said that they were having a NABS conference festival downtown. And so I couldn't take off the whole week off, but I took off a few days. And that's how I came to know DABS. After that, I started attending, and then different people like Amy, they encouraged me to tell stories because I don't think I started telling stories about 2000.
Okay.
So I was a member. I became president. I did other things, but I wouldn't tell stories at first.
Okay.
But
so you came here as a part of, trickle down from being a part of NAB.
From attending the NAB festival. That's how I found about DABS.
About DABS. Okay. Then you came in full force, became president, did a lot of the admin things, the leadership portion. And so when did you start telling stories?
I started about 2000. And I remember we were telling at a nightclub on Gratiot.
Okay.
And then I forgot my punchline at the end. And my husband laughed at me. He said, oh, you forgot your punchline. I said, yes, I did. So one older member, she said, well, sometime I'll just write it on a card just in case I forget. But yeah, but that's when I started, and then I started attending NAB. I attended NABS every year, and the only year that I really didn't attend was the year my husband, he's a Vietnam veteran, and he got sick from his injuries, and I didn't go that year, and then I attended online. And not in person for a couple of years after that. But every year I was excited about going to the National Association of Black Storytellers because I would compete in the Liars Contest.
Now, that's interesting. And so the National Association, which means that all the different associations come together and have different types of programming. And one of the programs is called the Liars Contest.
Well, yes, it's called, at the time it was called the Liars Contest. Yeah.
And so give us some information about that.
Well, you would have, I think like on that Saturday of the conference, we would have two sets of contests, one children that would tell a lie, and then adults. So we would sign up, and your story had to be from 3 to 5 minutes, and you had to just tell a lie. And that was, and usually the lies, they were funny. They would just have a really strange twist to them. And the year I won, I told a story about the Pillsbury Doughboy.
think I've heard you tell that story. And so, what's the punchline on that particular story? Was it a twist? It was a twist, right?
Well, in my story, the Pillsbury Doughboy died. But then after I try to travel, I go to the airport, and you know how they have you stand like this.
Sure.
And so once I went out, they had to search me, and they had an X on this hip and that hip, and I looked up. It says abnormal, and so they told me to empty my pockets. I said, I don't have anything in my pockets. This is me. And so they had to pat me down and everything. And so that part was true. So I realized that the Pillsbury Doughboy would always be with me.
Excellent. Oh, gosh. And you won with that story.
I won first place with that.
Place.
Yeah.
Wow. You've won some multiple times with different types of contests they have there as well, correct?
Well, I won second place once with a different story. But it was exciting because it made me think, and I think one year my aunt told me that she had, I have a younger aunt that's my age, and she had gone to Oklahoma, and that we had a great aunt there that was a bag lady. And so but she was a bag lady, but she had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. And she collected cans and stuff, and she used that to support her sister, who was my grandmother. You know, my grandmother by that time was elderly, because this aunt was the baby aunt.
I see.
And so I said, well, let me tell something about her. And so I did that one. And so that's what I would try to do, use real life, and with a little twist to it.
And so that is your secret behind how you tell your story?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so we know how you got to DABS and what you've been doing since you've been here with DABS. So what about your future as a storyteller? What's next?
Well, one thing, every December, this year we're having it at the library. Every year we do a holiday storyteller festival. And it's going to be from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And we'll have about 10 storytellers to tell in tandem. We'll have Santa Claus, light refreshments, and people will be able to take free pictures, selfies with Santa.
Right. Selfies with Santa. And so which library is it? Is it the main
Dutchville Library.
Is it Dutchville?
On West Grand Boulevard.
Okay. Okay. In the evening or midday?
From 12 o'clock to about 3.
Okay.
Because they close at 6.
And it's free and open to all?
It's free and open to everyone.
Okay. And so DABS is the host?
DABS and the Detroit Public Library.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And they asked us to come back now. Used to be I'd have to find a venue. Okay. So we're asked to come back.
So about how many years straight now?
About, we've been telling since about 1998. So that's about 25 years. Absolutely. And we've been at different venues. We've been at the main library. We've been at the Children's Museum, the old one and the new one. Wow. And then I hope to get my books published. That I have stories that I have written.
Truly a storyteller, an author, and an advocate for children, right? Yeah. That's your background, isn't it?
Yeah.
For kids? Okay.
Yes, I'm a school psychologist by profession.
When I first met you, like I said, back in 2010, I was just in awe on all talent that's, at DABS table. Well, we certainly thank you for sharing again. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Look to see you again on the next time that you're scheduled to come out.
Okay, then.
Fantastic. So we appreciate that. And again, we want to just say thank you to our elder, Vicki Slaughter. And then we're going to, at this point, get ready for our second telling. But first, we need to take a break for our sponsor. Looking for a new church home? Then look no further than 14179 Evergreen Road, where you'll be welcomed in at 10 a.m. every Sunday morning at Rosedale Park Baptist Church. They're located at 14179 Evergreen Road in Detroit, Michigan. For upcoming events and live stream information, call 313 538 1180. Again, 313 538 1180. Gregory Alexander, Senior Pastor. And we're back. Thank you so much to Rosedale once again. Rosedale Park Baptist Church. As you see, our background is a little different, but we thank them for sponsoring by opening up their doors to allow us to tape here on today. I'm excited. I've been excited all day. I'm excited now because when I think back to 2003. 2003, I was just mesmerized. I saw our next teller at another event just doing her thing. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, I want to be like her when I grow up. And so, I tell you what, without further ado, let's bring Elder Amy, with an I, Jackson, on to do what it is that she do. Elder Amy Jackson.
Hello. My name is Elder Amy. I have other names, but I do love Elder Amy. It takes a few years to become an elder, so I'm thrilled about that. But I want to tell you a story today about Sunday morning at our house. I guess this story is to bring you up to date to how my world was. My parents were born in the 1800s, the late 1800s, but it was still 1800. So they didn't have a telephone at that time. They didn't have cars. So the world was very new to him when he left Georgia and came to Detroit, Michigan. Of course, Mom followed him about 2 years later, and they began their family. I'm a part of that family. I'm the youngest of 14. And Sunday morning, Dad would wake up and cook. He didn't cook any other day but Sunday. He would cook biscuits and bacon and eggs. And he had the best biscuits in the world. And he'd come to the stairs of our house and say, Robert, Sister Charles, Jesse, Mary Lou, John, Rooney, Aaron, Jenny, Shirley, Amy, is all ready. Well, I'm the youngest of 14. He named 10 because 4 of my sisters and brothers had died before, no, 3 had died before I was born. And the last one to die was 2 years old. And so I was the youngest of the 14. So Dad would call Sunday morning, bright and early. Robert, Sister Charles, Jesse, Mary Lou, John, Henry, Aaron, Jenny, Shirley, and Amy. Get on down here, it's ready. We go down there. Dad had such good cooking. He loved to cook. He liked to tell stories too. And we would serve one another the food and pass it to one another. Oh, we had a good time. And then we'd start gossiping. We'd talk about, well, my brothers and sisters, the older ones, always wanted the younger ones to know what Dad and Mom would do a long time ago. So Dad said, do you remember that story that I was in jail and the police called and said, Mr. Davis, we have your son in jail. My daddy said, he got my son in jail. What'd he do? Well, Mr. Davis, he's out much late. And at that time, there was a curfew for young black men. And so my brother was at the movie. And they took him out of the movie. And so they took him to jail. Well, we all know, let's pray that the police get us and not Daddy, because Dad would throw a fit and scare us to death. So anyway, the police called, and Dad said, you say you have him? Yes, sir, we have him right here, and we need you to come and get him. My dad said, you know what? I think you ought to keep him for a few days. And so there was my brother in jail for 3 days. We would laugh and just thought it was the funniest story ever. Another story I enjoyed hearing them tell was the one about the police coming to our porch. And my brother said, oh my God, there's the police. And he ran and got in the closet. My dad was looking around, wondering why he's running around. So he goes to the door and said, "May I help you?" And the policeman said, "Mr. Davis, we're looking for your son." "I got 4 sons. What son are you looking for?" "Well, sir, we're looking for Charles." "Charles what?" "Well, on here it says Charles E. Davis." "Oh, yeah, that's my son." "What did he do wrong?" "Well, sir, he has a lot of tickets, and they haven't been paid, and we're coming to, well, see why he hasn't paid the tickets." I just said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Well, he's right over here in the closet. You can come and get him if you want him." We all howled. Every time we hear the story, it is just so hilarious because Daddy did not lie for anyone or his children. He wanted us to do right all the time. And so therefore, if you were caught by the police, you would pray that Daddy didn't find out because he believed in tough love. We love to tell stories about our family and the things that they did and the fun things they did. They also did some very good things. They were volunteers in the neighborhood. My brothers would cut the lawns of the neighbors. My sisters would go and help them read or learn to read. Not only just black people in the neighborhood, but the people who came from other countries. When we moved on 12th Street, my mom would teach the people how to read. And so she could read, of course, and so could Dad. So Mom did the reading, and my sisters would go around and help. We had a wonderful family. We had a wonderful life. And I found out the other day that now very few families sit down and have dinner together. We had dinner together every day. Every day, but Sunday morning was special because Daddy would give instruction, what he expected us to do. He would let the boys know that he was expecting to do so-and-so's lawn or shovel so-and-so's snow, or the girls to take this to that person or that to that person. And he had it written down in a little book so he wouldn't forget. Now I understand the little book because I'm in my 80s and I have to have a little book to remind me of what I want to do or not do. One day, a minister, I was at church a lot as a little girl because I started playing for the church at 7. And so I would listen intently to the sermons, and I loved the hymns. I loved the words and the poetry. And so one day I came home and told my dad, "Dad, the minister said you shouldn't drink." And my mother was behind my dad saying, "No." She was trying to tell me to shut up, but I didn't get the hint. And so Daddy said, "What'd you say?" I said, "The preacher said, Daddy, you shouldn't drink." He said, "What he know about me?" I said, "Well, Dad, I don't know. He said you shouldn't drink." "Well, tell him to come over here and see me." My mother said that evening, "Amy, you got to be careful about what you say to your dad. He gets upset about things. You can ask the minister to come over, but I can't promise you'll be able to stay at the church." So I went to the minister and said, "My daddy wants to see you." And mind you, I'm only 8 or 9 years old at this time. And so the minister comes over and knocks at the door, and Daddy opens the door. "May I help you?" He said, "Well, sir, I'm Reverend John from across the street." "Oh, yeah, I heard about you. Come on in here and have a seat." And he had him sit down, as a courteous gentleman would do. He said, "Now, I understand you have good sermons." "Yes, sir, I try to have good sermons. I try to teach young people and all of us to live right." "Oh, what you call living right?" "Well, having a nice home and taking care of your children and feeding them. I understand you don't like people drinking." "Well, Miss Reverend John, well, is that what you said?" "Well, I was giving a sermon about drinking, and we should control our drinking and not drink at all." My daddy said, "I got 14 children. You got any children?" The minister said, "No, sir, I don't have any children." He said, "Well, why? That's why you don't drink." And so the minister would just fall out laughing. He just thought it was the funniest thing. He said, now I want you to be careful what you tell my daughter, because I raised my daughter, okay? You don't raise my daughter. I got 10 daughters, okay? You have 10 women in the house telling you, no. You don't say that in front of my daughter. Well, will you let her come back to play? Well, it depends on your sermons. You got your sermons planned? I got my things in a book that I tell my kids. You got yours in a book? Well, sir, I usually use the Bible. I use the Bible too. You know, that's how I raise my kids, like the Bible. I have each one in a group, and they teach one another what to do. But don't do that sermon anymore. My children listen to me. Yes, sir. These were just funny stories because Daddy would make you howl and laugh because of what he believed in. And one thing I really liked about were his instructions on Sunday night. He would tell us, I hear that so-and-so got in late, or I hear that you were not talking right in class, and I don't know where he heard these things, but he was always giving instruction. He wanted all of us to finish school. All of us finished school. Now at our house, when you finish school, that meant finishing the 12th grade. And then you move out. Move out? Oh yeah, you move out if you don't go to college. So everybody went to college. Everybody. And Dad would say, well, when are you going to leave? Because my brothers were still at home at 30 and 34 years old. But they finally got married and had their own families. And I'm sorry to hear that so many families are not eating together anymore. We didn't have fast foods when I was a little girl. But on Sunday morning, that was the time. We had the most wonderful fellowship, and we had hot biscuits, just like Daddy cooked them. They were wonderful. Sunday morning.
That works for us because, oh my gosh, I'm floating right about now. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you know, for those of you who are not aware, this is where it all began. This is one of our co-founders.
Yeah, that's right.
Of DABS.
There were 4 of us. There was myself, Amy Jackson, and then we had Jenny Christensen because it was at her house.
Okay.
There was the other person was Sylvia Brown, and the last person was Jenny Christensen. It was at her house, so there were 4 of us. Anita was Anita's idea, but Anita was an elder to us. So since she was an elder, it was her idea, but we had to do the work. So she had me write everyone that needed to come to a storytelling meeting. And so I wrote all of the schools in Detroit, everyone, every librarian from kindergarten, junior high, and high school. And I wrote them all to ask them would they come to a meeting at my sister Jenny's house. Now, of course, we weren't expecting a lot of people. You know how you send out advertisement and you want the people to answer? We figured maybe 5, maybe 10. Well, my sister's house was packed. She lived in Palmer Woods at the time. Huge house. It was packed full of people. It was the most exciting thing I had. I just couldn't believe it. But I sent out the letters as Anita instructed me, and they made me president that night. And a lady by the name of, I'm trying to think of her right now, she was our second president. She became the person that took notes. We just had so many people, wonderful people that night. And it was on October 31st. It was Halloween night. So it had a wonderful beginning, and I can't believe it's been over 30 years now.
Over 30 years. And so when you guys sat down and thought about, creating a place for those who would aspire to come to tell stories, what was the whole premise behind it?
Well, I'll tell you, I had, my sister had called me, my older sister called and gave me instructions to meet her friend at Wayne State University who was trying to start a storytelling group. And so I went as I was instructed, because that's what you did. The older sisters and brothers told you what to do. So I went to that meeting and I enjoyed it. Then I decided, I really should give something back. I really should give back. I was a performer at that time. I performed on harp and piano. And so but I thought I really should go back and teach. And I had a master's in special ed and guidance and counseling. So I was hired, and so I couldn't attend those meetings anymore. And Nita said, why aren't you coming to the meeting? I said, well, I started working. So I decided, well, what I will do is maybe tell stories on the weekend at the library. So they said that they thought that was all right. And then the idea came that we should have our own little storytelling group. And so we pulled away from the Wayne State University group that would have teachers going into different, that were retired. They were retired.
Okay.
So they were all elders to me. And they would retire and they would go into the different schools and tell stories. Barbara Coulter, Dr. Barbara Coulter was the one. She had that idea of having us go to the schools and tell stories. And we could do that, and the teachers could go out and learn how to tell stories while we kept their class. So that's why it's important that the storytellers had to be certified teachers. So we were all going into the classroom, telling the stories, and the beautiful stories. And the kids learned to love stories, love reading, and we found that was easier for them to learn and especially enjoy reading, just hearing stories. It wasn't just stories for little kids. It was stories for big kids too. We went to high schools, we went to junior high and elementary school. And of course the stories are different depending on the story or the group we were invited to tell. And so I understand DABS has kept it up. I'm not as active in DABS as I was because I've gotten older, and now I'm spending much of my time trying to leave a history for my children, so when I go, they will carry on the importance of telling stories, the importance of reading, the importance of sharing as family members. And so I am going to Utah, to the national, that I'm happy about that. And the largest in the world genealogy studies are in Utah, and so I'm hoping to get some really good information from them. So those of you who do tell stories or have never told stories, you might want to visit the genealogy studies that they have at Wayne State and also at the Mormon Tabernacle. I think they call it Mormon, it's another name. It's not church, it's another name for church. But anyway, they have the largest genealogy study in the world. And so I'm excited about that. As I'm telling you these stories, I hope that you will tell your family stories and pull them on, because they're beautiful stories and they're unique just to your individual family.
And you know what? That's interesting. You share so much information on how that started, and it's very important for us to understand that as we help to continue on with still your guidance and leadership, even though you say you're not as active, but not to us. We still realize that you're still here with us.
Well, I want to keep going. My mother kept going.
Yeah.
She was a little younger than myself when she passed, and my daddy passed very early. But I think he just worked himself to death because he was so determined that we would all go to school, and we did. But it's just that it was just difficult because he worked in the foundry, and so that was hard work. And mostly black men worked in the foundry. But to show you what learning can help, my brothers became electrical and engineer at Ford and working in the drafting department. Another brother taught special ed. So education is important for our kids to learn, and we must set the example.
Okay. And
so they set the example for their children, and their children in turn have gone to school. So I try to encourage children to go to school.
Absolutely.
And beyond high school, you could have something like an occupation where you might want to make things. We are very creative as a people. We really are. We've learned so much. And I learned a lot from Dr. Wright, who the museum is named, because he gave me information to give my students about the inventions that we made as Black people. So, no, you don't stop because you get older, but you do slow up. And your attention changes. It's changing from storytelling to really thinking about what's going to be when I'm gone. What will they know to tell their children? I must prepare them to tell good stories, stories that will encourage them to be better and better and better.
And so that's what you're inspired for the future.
Yeah, right.
You know, when you talk about Charles Wright, Dr. Charles Wright.
The what?
Dr. Charles Wright.
Oh, he was wonderful. He was wonderful. He gave me all kind of information about the inventions. I don't have them in this book. I brought the wrong book. But I would like for them to know that he was a man that was always talking about inventions. I understand when before the museum was built, he had the museum in his home. And he would bring people and teachers to come and find out all the things that he'd learned.
Sure.
So we did more than just invent the stoplight and those kinds of things. Yeah. And the paint, a long time ago when cars were first made, they were all black. And then a black scientist, invented some way that we could paint different colors and paint the cars.
Wow.
So that was one of our inventions, our people. So the stories, we must tell them, let them know. It was nice to know. And my kids, they told me, why bother about making a bulletin board? The kids are going to tear them down. But I never had a bulletin board torn down because the kids would look at that when they could see themselves. It was exciting. I love teaching and would love to have continued. But you can't stay in teaching forever. So you sit down and try to help the children in the neighborhood, and teach them what you would like for them to know. And they teach you something too. Young people are really smart. I am having trouble with the computer, so I need help with that. So I have young people showing me how to work the computer. I'm not very good at it. I really don't like it a lot because you don't talk. And they're constantly on the phone. But that's the new age. I can remember my father disliking the telephone. I thought that was the weirdest thing. How could you dislike it? But it was just so new to him. They didn't have the wind up. It's just a different world, and you must grow along with the world. And I plan to do that. Keep growing as long as I'm here.
And you know what? And your evidence of your example of doing just that. I mean, over 30 years, this organization has helped plenty of people. Who would have thought that, yes, telling stories is correlating with being an educator?
Right.
I bet you had some wonderful times over the years.
Oh, I did. Teaching children, I especially liked, because I was able to use my music in teaching my special ed kids, especially their timetables. I would make up songs, and if they could sing the song, kids love songs. They'd sing the songs and they'd get their timetable. What I would do, I would find out from teachers what they were going to study for that week and have my kids come into me special times and read with me. So they would have it already memorized. So when the teacher called on them in class, they could raise their hand and read. So the kids didn't know that they had read it already, but they were prepared. And so that gave them a good self-esteem. Self-esteem is so important to young people, especially when they see a black teacher. It gives them another sense of importance that if that lady can do it or if that man can do it, I can do it too.
Absolutely. Be that example of what we want to instill in our children.
Yes. Instill in them.
And then so we look down in the future. What would DABS look like to you in 30 years from now? What's your hopes?
Well, I'll tell you what Anita was hoping. Anita said that she would like for us to have a building where we could have it just for storytellers to come and have a catalog of the stories that we have told and the people that told those stories. And I just didn't think that far, but that's what she was thinking about. That was her dream. My dream is that we tell our stories and educate our children and our adults and other nationalities to be aware of what we have accomplished as a people. As Maya Angelou says, we still rise, still we rise. And the more we teach one another and teach our children, and they in turn teach others, everybody has a history, especially Black people. And Native Americans, the Mexicans, everybody has a history in this country. We all help to build this country. And as much as we can tell people what we have learned, the better they are to face the world, that they're not the only one, they're a part of a large globe of people. And that's wonderful to know.
That's what it is. That's what it is. I love that vision. I mean, maybe you're on our way to have a place
Right.
where all storytellers, like a museum.
That
Yeah.
was Anita Timber's
Okay.
dream. That's what she wanted.
Okay.
I can't say it was my dream, but because she was my elder,
Sure.
she was 20 years older than me or 22 years older than me, that I wanted to help her make her dream come true. The one thing we did start an organization, and that night it was named DABS, the
Wow.
Detroit Association of Black Storytellers. There used to be a song called Real Cream's A Little Dab of Do Ya, and so we started singing A Little Dab of Do Ya, meaning a few little storytellers can save the day in any classroom. We bring them together on a story.
I just got chills. Wow, right there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm glad that you invited me. It's nice to come, and I want to come back.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll have some other stories other than my family. Maybe I can tell some stories about my experiences as a performer as I traveled. And I learned a lot. And I'm so thankful that my parents were strict. They believed in tough love, and it prepares you for the world. And I was an adult when I got into show business. I think I was 21 or 22, so I wasn't a child. So I had a good foundation. That's so important. So I thank you for the privilege of talking to you today and talking about instruments. I love instruments.
Well, tell us a little bit about how your journey was as far as your upbringing, like what you were saying a moment ago.
Well, my parents said I was playing piano at 2. I just woke up and started playing one day. And that surprised them. Of course, I'd gone to church all the time. And a lady down the street would let me go with her to church. My mother said, well, all right, but you must promise you don't join. She was a member of a sanctified church. Oh, I thought that was wonderful. They let me play the tambourine. And I remember being 4 or 5 years old. I mean, I could play that tambourine. I loved it. And so from there, I got to know the poetry of the hymns. Poetry of the hymns and the Black hymn writers. Look them up. The Black hymn writers. They're just fascinating. Well, anyway, they're usually in the hymn book. And that's how I started playing for the church. And I played till Dad made me stop for a little bit because he didn't like what the minister was teaching. After he got over that about the whiskey, then he said, okay, I could go back and play at the church. But I played, and I play at a church to this day. I enjoy playing because that's God's gift to me. I've always played all my life.
Wow.
And so I went to New York and decided to play in some supper clubs. Supper clubs at that time, people ate while you played the piano.
Okay.
And while at the piano, you meet other entertainers come in and said, you ought to take acting lessons. I said, oh, I don't need to take, oh yeah, you ought to take it. So I took acting lessons. And I was in a class with some very important people, and they kept saying, you ought to go audition for shows. So I started auditioning for shows. And then I finally got Sammy Davis Jr.'s show, Golden Boy. And I had auditioned maybe 5 or 6 times. And The seventh time, I remember it was the seventh time because I was upset because I didn't have enough money to pay the piano player. Every time you audition, you play the piano player to play for you. And so I said to whoever was sitting in the audience, I couldn't see, I said, well, I don't have any more money to pay another piano player. I'll play for myself. And I hear this voice. I knew it was Sammy Davis Jr. He said, you play piano? I said, yeah. Well, come down and play something for me. I said, okay, where do you go? So I went down the stairs and sat down and played. And he said, she does play piano. She's hired.
Wow.
Had nothing to do with my education. Had nothing to do with my piano, my singing, nothing. Because I played piano, I had something different. And that's what I tell young people. You got to read so you can read those contracts and
so
understand what they're saying.
You were playing, did you use any music? Did you just play something that you knew?
Oh, I played, I remember the audition song I played for him on the piano was, what's All I Want Is a Room Somewhere Far Away from Cold Night Air. Well, anyway, I made it a blues. Instead of playing it like she does it in the show, all I want is a room somewhere with an accent. I did it being a black person. I did it in a more bluesy style. They thought it was the greatest thing since popcorn, so I got the job. And I went from there because I had experience in doing sight singing. They called Sammy and said, is there anyone in your show that can read? He said, well, yeah, we have one girl here that plays piano. Would you mind if she auditioned for our show? So no, we had found out that at that time they didn't have any black background singers. And they were trying to break that. So they had me come and audition for them. And so they, well, welcome Amy, and what do you sing? And I said, I sing second soprano. So they gave me some music. I had to sight read the music. Then they gave me the soprano part. Do the soprano part. I did the soprano part. Can you do a bass line? I said, of course. I used to play bass. So I know the bass line, so I sang the bass line.
Wow.
Can you sing tenor? I knew this was not quite right, you know, but I did say I could sing tenor notes. So when they were finished, they said, do you think the audition was fair? I said, well, I don't know. I've never done an audition, but I came, an audition for singing for Ed Sullivan's show, but I do know that I was supposed to sing second soprano, but you had me sing all the parts. But if that's what they do, that's what they do. By the time I got home, I had been hired by Ed Sullivan. So you never know. Whoever would have thought that my being able to read music and sight read it would be an asset?
Yeah.
Because I'm a piano player. And so I try to tell children, don't think the classes you take are unnecessary. You never know when they're going to come in handy. You never know. And so I felt very proud that I was able to sight read and break that color line. I can't remember what Ed Sullivan was on, but I don't know whether it was NBC or what, it was one of those. And I did background work. My family wasn't that happy because they wanted me to be out and sing. But background singing, you sing in the back.
Oh, I see.
And you accompany people who are singing or telling a joke, how they have a music on the background. And so that's how my career started. And then I traveled around and enjoyed it. But in my heart, I wanted to be like my mom. I wanted to be able to have a family and cook. And so Liberace asked me to come and play. For him, he would like for me to open his show. I said, oh no. Well, okay, when will I be playing? He said, oh, you'll be playing, not right away, but during the Christmas time. I said, during the what? He said, during the Christmas time. Oh, no, I don't play during the Christmas time. You know, I'm home with my family. I said, I'm not going to take the job. So that was my decision at that time. You have to make up your mind, what do you want to do? My family wanted me to be a performer and out there. I really wanted to be like them. I mean, I would fly home just to see my sister's new sofa or my brother's new chair or the new baby. You know, I was always leaving.
Sure.
And so I knew that the best thing for me was to come home and be what I wanted to be and raise my children like my parents raised me, to respect and honor their home and their Christ.
And that
Dear
has
God.
worked best for you. It shows. We want to thank you so much for taking the time out to come
Thank you
and
for
share.
inviting me.
Absolutely. And you know, it won't be the last time.
Okay. I got it in my book.
I love that idea about the book.
I got it written down. I'm going to write that down.
There you have it.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And so I hope everyone has enjoyed what we brought this evening. I know I have. Oh my gosh, I'm just full right now. But we want to take a moment to say thank you to Elder Amy with the I, Jackson, as well as Elder Vicky Slaughter. You guys have really shared an immense amount of information. And so we're going to take a break for a moment. And when we come back, we'll wrap it up. Be right back.
Looking for a new church home? Then look no further than 14179 Evergreen Road, where you'll be welcomed in at 10 a.m. every Sunday morning at Rosedale Park Baptist Church. They're located at 14179 Evergreen Road in Detroit, Michigan. For upcoming events and live stream information, call 313-538-1180. Again, 313-538-1180. Gregory Alexander, Senior Pastor. Again, thank you to both of our elders for sharing on today. We cannot say thank you enough. You guys did a fabulous job. We also want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. And of course, we thank our sponsors, particularly the one from today, which is where we're at right now, Rosedale Park Baptist Church. That's all we have, actually, you guys. I look forward to, again, seeing what we can bring on next month. Tune in, go to our website. And speaking of websites, the church website is actually www.atthedale.net. Tune in, see what you can learn from their website, as well as to go to our website. Thank you, one. Thank you all. God bless. Pamela, Tella, and guest host. Asante.
Okay. Hello, everyone. The Detroit Association of Black Storytellers are so pleased you joined us tonight. DABS Season 4 premiere, The Legends of DABS, with Elder Vicky Slaughter and Elder and Founder Mama Amy Jackson. Join us next month, November 27th at 7 p.m. as we bring you the beauty and poetry. Friday, November 24th, 2023. Doors open at 6:55. Concert starts at 7 p.m. right here on the Detroit Association of Black Storytellers YouTube page. We will have 3 amazing tellers: the electrifying John 2 Gray, the smooth Shakita McKenzie, and the hilarious Stroll Pryor with your host, Jasmine Ross. Take a minute and subscribe to this YouTube page if you do not, so that you will never miss this program starting time or any content we may post. Subscribing is free. Again, thank you for joining us to watch The Legends of DABS with stories by Elder Vicky Slaughter and Elder and Founder Amy Jackson with your host, Pamela Williams. Music director is Mama Michelle McKinney. Camera technician is Brother James Graham. Production engineer is Jasmine Ross. Public relations sponsorship director is Pamela Williams. And production director, myself, Tom Ross. Along with the Detroit Association of Black Storytellers, we thank you for attending DABS 4th Friday Story Hour. See everyone on Friday, November 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m. with beauty and poetry. Doors open at 6:55. Concert starts at 7 p.m. Please be safe out there. Peace and blessings to you all. Until next time, Asante Sana.